Hello and welcome to another Recruiter 360 TV with me, Toby Babb, and delighted to be joined today by Damian Hughes. Damian, how are you?
Brilliant, Toby, and brilliant to be here, thank you.
Great to have you, thanks so much for giving your time. Damian has just done one of our Genius talks in the office, and you'll be able to look at that and see some of the secrets of the Barcelona Way and the code of high performance environments. It's a brilliant book and available on Amazon and all good bookstores, so please do get yourself involved in that. Damian, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My background is in psychology, particularly in organisational psychology and change. So I'm a professor of organisational psychology and change, looking very much at how do you create high-performing cultures where people can thrive and perform close to their potential. I work across a whole range of sectors as a consultant in this area, work in sport, business and education. And then the final role is that I write a number of books very much around these topics to try and sort of get the ideas out there in the mainstream. So like you just mentioned, the last book I did was looking at how FC Barcelona took these principles and applied them into the competitive world of European football. And
it really resonates, doesn't it, as a story, because Barcelona have had such a period of super success.
Yep.
And it's when they sort of really committed to a commitment culture, as you called it. Can you just explain a little bit about what a commitment culture is?
Yeah, so Barcelona spoke about this idea that in a world where talent starts to even itself out, where people are being paid extraordinarily high amounts of money, where we're analysing the data to the nth degree, they believe that culture can be a competitive advantage. Now, in particular, when we talk about culture, there's this idea of a commitment culture, and a commitment culture is a culture driven by a really clear sense of purpose, with some very, very clearly defined behaviours that underpin it. That's the starting point. Now, the research around commitment cultures say that if you can get them right, they almost never fail.
Yeah.
So some research indicates that they tend to be about 22% more successful than any others.
Yeah.
If employee retention is an issue, people tend to be loyal to these companies even when they're offered pay rises of up to 36% to go elsewhere. So I often describe it as the intersection. A commitment culture is the intersection where doing good and being good somehow align.
Yeah.
And that's what Barcelona did 10 years ago when, in that same period, they've won 8 out of 10 domestic league titles. They've won the European Cup 3 times, having only ever won it twice before in their history. And been world champions 3 times in that same period.
It was a really deliberate play from them, wasn't it, to go through there? And you've sort of summarised that with Vassar as an acronym, right? Can you tell us a little bit about?
So it's no coincidence that Vassar is the acronym, because culture isn't a silver bullet. There's not just one thing that delivers a culture.
Yeah.
It's almost like the best way to think of it is like an ecosystem. There's a number of different factors that if you remove one of them, it won't break the culture, but it'll weaken it.
Yeah.
So the 5 things are, first of all, you have a clear sense of the big picture. That's the why, the what and the how.
Yeah.
The second thing is the arc of change. That's the A. So this is basically saying that success doesn't happen in straight lines. It's not a linear process. There will be times where there will be setbacks, there will be difficulties. And this is the arc of change. So it's about preparing yourself for those moments. The R is the repeated practices. So this is about what you do consistently becomes a habit. So it's about identifying the right habits to make as part of your training. The C bit is an interesting bit. This is the cultural architects. This is how you develop people within your organisation to lead without necessarily having the title of being a leader. And then the final A is authentic leadership. So it's about having the right people at the top of the organisation to oversee the culture that you're trying to create.
Yeah, I think that works brilliantly, and there's so many great stories about how they've done that and the commitment to it within the book. And I think that we're a people business, and recruitment's a people industry, and there's no product for a lot of companies who are in the space, so people becomes absolutely fundamental to that. Recruitment as an industry has a shocking retention rate.
Right.
I read recently that I think of every 3 people who go into the recruitment sector, only 1 of them is successful. So that's 66% churn out of the industry in the first year of people who come into it. And this is something which you've studied, you know, the way that people can build cultures who do that. I'm proud to say that we are way above the industry average about keeping people in the industry, and our retention ratios are performing above it. And I think that there are ways and means of creating that sort of stuff, and I think it comes from selecting in many ways. people who understand that sort of stuff. What does a Barcelona person look like for you? What does a great cultural champion look like? A cultural architect, someone who's going to thrive in that sort of high performance environment. What does that look like to you?
Brilliant question. I think it starts from the idea of the big picture thing there. To go back to that, it's you have to be able to define in your culture, when you're good, why are we good?
Yeah.
So I use a phrase that I know you use here as well in the business, is around success leaves clues. So I often encourage anybody, if you're thinking about how do you develop a culture, start from the question of when we've been good, why are we good?
Yeah.
Rather than take it for granted, let's do a proper analysis, look at the DNA of why we're good. And what you'll find is the answer to that question is often to be found in behaviours. So FC Barcelona, to answer your question about when they were good, why were they good, they said there was 3 behaviours that the organisation just didn't compromise on. So those 3 behaviours were humility was the first one.
Yeah.
That willingness to learn, to want to get better, to ask questions. The second one was about hard work, so being prepared to invest in your own talent. And then the third one was you put the team above your own self-interest.
Yeah.
So they actively go out to recruit people that demonstrate evidence of those behaviours, people that have been prepared to sign up to those behaviours and demonstrate them in pretty much every context they like. Now they say when you're clear about that, you give people a really clear message about you either sign up to be part of this culture because you sense that kind of alignment, or maybe you don't come into this business. Maybe you take your behaviours that define you into a different business where maybe those practices might be more accepted.
Yeah.
So at Barcelona, I would say that they have people there that are really clearly have been inculcated in it through the academy right the way through to first team level, that have got the requisite humility, hard work, and that willingness to put the team above anyone else.
So those 3 things, humility, hard work, and team first.
Yep.
Is that purely applied to Barcelona, or can it apply to any environment? Is that something which you see as a sort of 3 key factors in any performance environment? Because you've worked with loads, right?
Yeah, kind of, but I'd urge caution about that, because I think the danger that I see when we use an example like this is people then quickly adopt them and go, if Barcelona have done it, I'm going to do it. And actually that's where it starts to fall down, because it becomes a gimmick.
Yeah.
Where it's about identifying the behaviours that are relevant to your organisation.
Yeah.
So, to give you an example, and I know you've done a lot of work with James Kerr, who's and his work on the New Zealand All Blacks is incredible.
Yeah.
But I see, like some coaches will say, "Oh, we're going to sweep the sheds in our organisation," and you say, "Why?" Because I've read that New Zealand do it. And you go, I understand why New Zealand sweep the sheds, because it's all about leaving the place in better than it was when you found it. Why are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Because New Zealand do it, and you go, it's a gimmick.
Well, that happened twice, I think, at the same sort of time. So when the book came out was 2013 Legacy, I think it was, wasn't it? And you saw at that stage Stuart Lancaster and England almost becoming a mini All Blacks in terms of a lot of the things that it was, and that's probably doing him injustice. But I think there was an awful lot of stuff there that was brought in that was very, even the white stadium, to like the symbolism of the white all the way through the Twickenham at that sort of stage. Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool was doing the same sort, trying to do the same sort of thing with the red nets and trying to get a lot of symbolism around stuff that was very clearly, in my mind, from having read Legacy at the same sort of stage and seeing what those 2 teams were doing. And initially it was very, very successful for them, right? Yeah. And then the World Cup, it unravelled in 2015, and
that's a really
Liverpool
interesting
unravelled
point.
Second series.
So then, when things go wrong, what's the first thing they throw out? They go, "Oh, we'll stop doing that." So you see, so it's a gimmick then. Yeah. Whereas if you look at New Zealand, they would do that whether they were successful or not, because that's endemic.
We'll have to wait to see if they're unsuccessful at any stage. Though.
Yeah, exactly. but they've thought it through, and that's why. So to answer your original question, are humility, hard work, and team first endemic? They might be, but they might. But what I'd encourage anybody to do is to come up with their own. Yeah. I often find that just by starting with that question of success leaves clues is a seductive question that everybody has an opinion on it. Yeah. So if anybody is listening to this thinking, how can I do it? Just start by saying, when we've been good, why are we good? Yeah. And to be able to identify it. Yeah. Because then it becomes unique to your culture then, because you've got evidence that works, you've got evidence of that best practice. So I say, for example, if you look at someone like Manchester United, I wrote a piece about them recently. So Manchester United have got 3 trademark behaviours.
And a must-read book.
Yeah, right, yeah, thanks for the plug, yeah. But Manchester United, they've got 3. So theirs are relentless.
Yeah.
They keep going for you. So there's a famous quote from Steve McLaren spoke about Manchester United never get beat. They occasionally run out of time, but they never get beat.
Originally Vince Lombardi's.
Yeah. The second one that they have is this idea of you play to win. You don't play not to lose.
Yeah.
So this idea of we gamble and we do that. And then the third behaviour that they have in their DNA is courage.
Yeah.
The courage to take risks, the courage to put your hand up and demand the ball even when you're getting beat.
Yeah.
So if you look at someone like Manchester United now, why have they been unsuccessful in the last 5 years? Well, part of it is how much evidence do you see of them playing to win? How much courage are you seeing? How much relentlessness are you observing?
Yeah.
Because I'd argue you see it in fits and starts rather than consistently sustained. So it'll always be unique to any culture.
So there's a team with 20 years worth of unrivaled success.
Yeah.
And there are clues all the way through that sort of time period. And Alex Ferguson, who you write about brilliantly in that book,
Yep. Thank you.
was an incredible leader. And there were clues all the way through that got followed up on. Why does that finish?
Well, I think what's interesting at Manchester United is I think they did develop a commitment culture for a long period of that success that you describe. I think in the last 8 years or so, it became an autocracy, which is a different type of culture. It was very much in the mould of Ferguson. And I think that becomes really interesting because when the Americans, the Glazers, brought the club out in 2005, I think Ferguson recognised the power that he had. So if he'd have opposed them, the buyout wouldn't have happened. So I think he recognised then he became the most important man at the club. Yeah. And I think that's betrayed a bit in his language. So I think one of his phrases he used to say pre-2005 was, there is nobody bigger than Manchester United. Yeah. After 2005, he used to add the coda, there is nobody bigger than the manager of Manchester United. Yeah. And I think it became very much then, he was driving that culture and protecting people within that culture because of the power that he wielded. Yeah. And so I think when you take out him, the vacuum that was left in his absence creates all kinds of dysfunction that you've seen since.
So there are players there who remain in the setup from that successful period, right?
Very few. And again, this was really interesting that I think there was a betrayal of their cultural legacy there. So when they were bringing in, say, Van Gaal, for example, he let players go that maybe weren't the best of players. You think of somebody like Darren Fletcher, or you think of somebody like Johnny Evans, that don't stand out necessarily as being superstars, but these are guys that had been around when the club was successful. So these were almost your corporate memory. These were guys that understood what that was. So they removed them and brought in people that had no sense of the history of what success was really there. So if you look at them now, there's very few players that were around when they were successful that are still involved with the team or the club in this current period. Yeah,
they just all go to the media and nibble from the outside.
Which is what you start to see, that you go there, so success leaves clues, and the people that knew what those clues were are not there in a position to influence and to implement them.
Staying on success leaves clues.
Sure.
That comes into debriefing and how you do that effectively. So I think a danger of success leaves clues, which I love as a strapline, I love as the concept of it. I think it can also be people doing it, sort of, semi-doing it, so to speak. So look at success leaves clues and look at the obvious stuff rather than things there that might be a little bit below the surface within that. How do you properly get to the bottom of success leaving clues to give yourself the best possible advantage to repeat?
It requires some serious thinking. So I often do an exercise with teams where I get them to say, divide your performance up between hard skills and soft skills. So think about your best performance, if that's how you want to do it, and how much of it is down to technical skills, we'll put that in the hard category, and how much of it is down to soft skills, communication, confidence, cohesion, things like that are more difficult to quantify. And I get people to say, give me a proportion. Now, I've yet to go into an elite team that would have a proportion, anything less than 30-70. 30% of it is down to hard skills, 70% is the soft skills. So the obvious second question I ask is, let's have a look at your working week. Where do you invest most of your time and energy? And the reality is, poor teams spend 95% of the time on the hard skills and very little on the soft skills. But then they're also telling you at the same time the majority of their success is down to the soft skills. So what that tells you very evidently is you're either waiting to get lucky or you're just coasting on what you already have.
Yeah.
It requires a proper investment of time, energy and application to work out when we're good, why are we good.
Yeah.
And so the answers don't come easily, because if they did, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, Toby, it's about a proper investment of time, energy and focus on looking at why we're good, and asking why, what did we do, what are the repeatable practices, what are the things that we can do that we can teach other people, who are the people that we can recruit and do it. So all those questions require some serious time and investment. So there's no point in doing it in not investing that time and then complaining when you don't get better, because it's like buying a lottery ticket, you're just waiting to get lucky. Or, like you say, it's superficial, which will eventually get found out when tough times come.
You talk a little bit there about the soft skills. Tell me a little bit about what great soft skills look like. Well,
like some of it is just the ability to communicate. Take that, for example. So you go into these elite cultures, a soft skill is about like people having the ability to catch people in as opposed to just catching them out. It's easy to catch somebody out and say when they haven't done it. It's a little bit harder and requires a bit more focus to catch people in and catch people doing things right and recognise that they're doing it right, and just to reaffirm good practice or something that they're doing. Now it's a very simple example of a soft skill, but it's one that high-performing cultures will have. You have that constant reaffirmation of what we're doing well. Another question is in terms of, so when I speak to coaches with teams that are doing badly, and one of their main focuses, they focus on areas, they try and coach from mistakes. They coach mistakes and try and address the mistakes that have been made. An example of a soft skill is you coach success, you coach what's worked well, and then you use that as a platform to build on how do we get better. So they're all really simple examples that demonstrate it, but they almost feel counterintuitive when you're in. So when you're in the middle of a bad run of performances, look at why we're bad and how do we need to get better, instead of looking at why were we good, what did we do well, and how do we improve on our strengths.
I think that's so inadvertently actually thinking about that. There's something we do every month where we look at the 3 things we can improve. So that's the sort of negative areas of where we can do things. But we also have a section called "That Shit Deserves a High Five," and look at some of those sort of things which we can reallocate and do better. And I think having that balance is quite an important aspect.
Yeah. So people think that. I mean, there's often a misinterpretation of this when people hear about soft skills. I think here in the UK we have this instinct of, oh, is this about doing high fives and group hugs and things like that? And the reality is, it's nothing like that. It's about the best environments have the ability to call you out. If you're doing it or you're making a consistent mistake, they will tell you, and they will tell you quickly. Yeah, exactly. But they will tell you, and they'll tell you quickly. But what's interesting is the best environments then, when you get it right, they'll also tell you, and they'll tell you quickly as well. So it's not about just believing that I can't tell somebody when they're doing it wrong because these soft skills are not permissible. No. The soft skills deliver the hard results. I remember many years ago, I did a research on a book where I went to possibly the most intimidating environment I'd ever visited. I went out to Detroit to a famous boxing gym called the Kronk Gym, and this was like a greenhouse of talent. They produced over 30 world champions in 25 years. But it was also in one of the poorest areas of one of America's poorest cities. So the violence, the gangs, the drugs, the crime, it was all very, very evident. And I'll make no bones about it, it was intimidating. So the head coach was a man called Manny Stewart. And when I got up there to meet him, he said to me, Damian, he said, how do you feel coming here into my world this morning? And I thought he was being polite, so I gave him a polite answer. I said, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to meeting you. I'm excited to come and see what you do at the gym. And it was his second question that really stopped me in my tracks. He said, that's really kind. He said, now do you mind telling me the truth? And next I found myself babbling away, telling him how frightened I was, how intimidated I found it, how nervous I was at wasting his time and things like that. And it was how he handled it that was a mark of his genius. He said, thank you for being kind with me. He said, thank you for being honest. He said, me and you can now do some work together.
Yeah.
And when I got to know him a little bit better, I went back to our first visit and I said, what did you do that first morning? Why did you ask me that second question? And he said, well, your first answer, how excited you were, told me one or two things. You were either a liar or you were a sociopath. He said, because you should have been intimidated coming here.
Yeah.
He said, so my second question, find out who am I dealing with? And it turned out you were just being polite. You were just being, and he said, but every child that comes into my world feels the same way you do.
Yeah.
They feel nervous, frightened, scared, a little bit intimidated. He said, and I realise I can't coach you if those emotions are clouding your judgment.
Yeah.
He said, so he gave me the best description of soft skills I've ever heard. It's a 3-word description. He said, you need to contain, then explain.
Okay.
Contain, then explain. And what he means by that is, if I make you feel that I care about you, I'm interested in your success, I want you to do well, I want to know a bit about your story. He said, you feel safe in that environment, you feel like you belong. And once we've got that, now I can explain how we're going to get better.
Yeah.
But he said, but too many organisations do it the other way around. They explain and then contain. They demand results from you and then try and convince you afterwards that they care about you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. You have to contain and then explain to get results. And that's the best description I've heard of why soft skills deliver hard results.
It was interesting. So last night I told you Stanley McChrystal, General Stanley McChrystal, was did a talk which we went to, and almost identical sort. So he was talking about leaders, his new book, where he talks about some of the greatest leaders in history.
Yep.
And he said if he could have 2 tips about leadership, what would they be? And he talked about building trust and actually taking a deep interest in the person who he's got reporting into, asking about the family, finding out that. And he said a really interesting thing that sort of stuck with me, that the minute you sort of ask the question and look over the shoulder is the minute you've lost them, lost them forever. And he put a real premium on a guy who's led thousands of men in the most trying of circumstances. And is that almost exactly the same way as you've just explained?
Well, I sometimes use a test with some of the coaches or leaders I work with when they'll say to me, I call it the Dickhead Test, because it came from and I know the language is a bit industrial, but the context was that I worked with a coach many years ago who described one of his team as a real dickhead. Yeah. And my question was, is he a dickhead or is he just a dickhead for you? Yeah. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's 2 possible answers to that question. He really might just be, that you might just be seeing what he's like all the time, or maybe it's a response to how you're dealing with him. So I came up with a really simple test that just got him to find out just some basic things. What are his kids called? How old are they? Yeah. Got any pets? What's his dog called? Where's he planning on going on his holiday this summer? Yeah. Simple things like that. And the reality was, this coach knew nothing about him. Yeah. So I said, so maybe he's just a dickhead for you. Yeah. Because there's nothing, you haven't invested anything in him as a person. Yeah. So when you're trying to make a withdrawal about him as a player, there's nothing there. There's no relationship to make that withdrawal from. Yeah. So it sounds very much like the Stanley McChrystal thing. It's those relationships,
contain,
isn't then it? Explain. Yeah.
It's brilliant. I'm speaking. We're sort of transitioning over to the final piece here, which is where you talk about authentic leadership. Yeah. And I've heard you speak about this before. I remember up in Leeds, you were talking about an example of a coach who was doing everything right on the pitch, but the results were going down, and there was a situation where you were talking to the coach's kid, right?
His son.
Tell us a little bit. I love that story. Tell us a little bit more about that story.
I remember talking with a coach, and I'd been asked to come in and see if we could do anything to help, and everything the coach was telling me, so I wasn't able to see him on the training field, but everything he was telling me was textbook perfect. So I was sat there thinking, it sounds like you're doing the right thing, so maybe it's a talent issue here rather than necessarily a coaching or environmental issue. And I was sat in his office one day, and his wife and son arrived to drop something off, and he left the room to go and speak to his wife and left me in his room with his young son. And his son was only about 5 or 6, and I remember talking to him, and I said, oh, do you like coming in to visit your dad's workplace? And he said, no, not really. And I said, why not? And he said, well, I never see any of the clowns my dad says he works with. Yeah. And it was just an aside, but I remember thinking it betrayed the evidence of how he really felt about some of the people he worked with. Yeah. So he was clever enough to be able to tell you face to face that I respect people, I do this. Yeah. But deep down his view, and he must have betrayed himself, was
about his team,
they're right clowns, there's some right idiots that work there. Yeah. And his son had simply given me the clue as to how he really felt. Yeah. So there's a lack of authenticity there, and people sense that. That's one of the things that if people are working with you and they sense that you're doing it to tick a box, or you're doing it because your next question is what can I get out of them, or the Stanley McChrystal, I ask you a question and I'm looking over your shoulder. People sense that lack of authenticity. Yeah. And the thing is, it's that idea of they just don't trust you. Now, I gave you the example in the session we did earlier this morning about, I'll see leaders that'll say to me, oh, people are our most important asset. And then you say, so what do you cut when times get difficult? What's the first thing you cut? And they go, we'll make headcount reductions. Yeah. They're not your most important asset then. Yeah. Because if they were, that wouldn't be your first port of call of what you do when times get tough. Now, the reality is most people ignore that 80% of the time. Yeah. But as a leader, there will be at least 20% of your leadership time where you just have to say to people, I need you to trust me. I need you to follow me on blind faith. Yeah. And people intuitively don't follow somebody that they don't like or that's a hypocrite. Yeah. We know that. Yeah. So the example I used in the session was the guy that tells you he runs a meritocracy and everyone's equally important, but gives himself the best car parking space. Yeah. That car parking space was probably insignificant 80% of the time, but that 20% of the time where you just need them to follow you on blind faith, that car parking space becomes the albatross around your neck. Yeah. Because that's where people go, not following you, because you don't do what you say you will do. And authentic leadership sort of shrieks through Barcelona, and the person who you sort of focus on most in the book is Pep Guardiola, right? Yeah, no, there's some fascinating research on this that says a leader, and I think this is a great one to sort of induce humility in a number of leaders. All the research suggests that a leader will account for about 10% of a team's performance, no more, no less. Now, I think that's great for introducing an element of humility to say you're the most important person, but you're not going to make or break it. Yeah. So what Barcelona did was they said they took Warren Buffett's advice for recruiting a leader to their organisation, and Buffett says you recruit against 3 criteria. The first one is energy, so you have to have the energy to see the task through. 3 E's of leadership, right? The second one is intelligence. You've got to be smart enough to know what you're doing. Yeah. And then the third one is integrity. Yeah. You've got to role model what you're asking everyone else to do. Yeah. Now, Buffett's advice is if you're smart and you've got energy, don't touch them. Because he said they're clever enough and energetic enough to be toxic to your culture and get away with being toxic for a long time. Yeah. The integrity piece is the one that will decide whether your leadership is authentic and whether you will maximise your 10% capability. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it, where it goes, and there's so many ingredients that come into making a winning culture and people within it. And if we're going to finish up with one question, and it's a question I always ask at the end of these sessions, and you can take all the stuff you've learned from the 11 books you've written and the countless teams that you help perform, the high performance environments you've looked at, and you'd say, here's one bit of advice for someone who's in our industry, or any industry, I guess, and say this is something which you can do to improve yourself. Yeah. What's your one thing? Oh wow, that's a great question. Be kind. Yeah. Be kind. I think that's, and I mean that in terms of be kind to yourself and then be kind to other people. Yeah. And that might sound like quite a soft term to use. Soft skill. But the reality is, when you're kind to yourself, when you make mistakes, when you come at it from a place of kindness, you don't beat yourself up for making those mistakes as long as your intentions were good. You work out, why did I do that wrong? How would I do it better? What did I do right? Yeah. When you apply that same criteria to people, you find that nobody sets out to do a bad job. Yeah. Maybe it's sometimes a lack of communication, maybe it's a lack of clarity, maybe it might be a skill issue. But when you're kind and you come at it from people's best intentions, you start to see a very different person. It's walking in people's shoes, isn't it? I think that's something which yeah. So we often, it's the old saying, isn't it? We judge people by their behaviour, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. Yeah. So if somebody cuts you up in traffic, they're a dick. Yeah, when you cut them up, it's because you're in a rush. Yeah. So, but when you come at it from a place of kindness, you start to try and understand people a little bit better and understand their motivations and drivers. Empathy, emotional intelligence. Sure. It's actually, I'm pleased you said it, because right behind us is your success, our business, our strapline as a company, which the whole thing is about making sure that everything we do is about making people more successful. So we'll run with that. Be kind. I'm happy you came through with that. Oh no, Damian, I've loved it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Toby. We've spoken most than what I could be speaking all day and beyond. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and speaking about everything. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with everyone at home, and thanks you all for watching. And we'll see you on another episode of Recruiter 360 TV very soon. Thank you. Thank you.